Hi, this is Craig Lane with Health Alchemy, part two of the small intestine talk, week 4, which is actually quite hilariously the beginning of week 3. But that's the way these meetings have gone, and that's just the way I would encourage all of you, if you're doing this, just to have these done ahead of time. So a week before your cleanse starts, you watch the first week. Then when it actually starts before week 1, you watch week 2. Before week 2 starts, you watch week 3. Before week 3 starts, you watch week 4. And then at the very end, when you're done with your cleanse, you watch how to transition out, which would be week 5. I mean, it's pretty important. I judge that it would be helpful for anybody to follow that process, because then you have a transition in week. There's not just 3 weeks here, but there's a prep week getting things ready. Then there's a week of transition out of the cleanse, which is actually the last week or week 5. So on to slide 9 now. We're on to the food list. If you have some of these things, if you're like me, you've already got these things on hand. I always have miso on hand in my house. I always have umabashi plums. So I would suggest changing your morning drink now to, and it's a little less antimicrobial, which is the umabashi, and moving on to miso and the brands there that are pretty much, pretty much nationwide. Miso Master and South River Miso. There are other brands that are healthy out there. I don't believe those are the only ones, but most of your commercially grade misos, especially like in Safeway, aren't going to be super medicinal. They need to be a year aged. Um, and choose any type you like. There's barley, and most of them are made with soybeans, but if the soybeans are organic and they're processed for a year, you're not going to end up with anything that's soybean based, but you're going to end up with a lot of microbes, and that's the whole point. There's a lot to choose from this food list here on slide 9. And if you're overweight and you're bloated and you're constipated, then raw dandelion greens would be a good one to choose. If you're underweight and deficient and you run really cold and you get a lot of loose bowels, then raw dandelion greens is not a right way to go. That would be more like the raw and cooked onion, perhaps, or the garlic, or the apple cider vinegar. Sunchoke roots aren't really in season much in the summer, but you might be able to find some in the larger health food stores like Whole Foods. If you're here on the West Coast, you might be able to find them. They'll be in the refrigerated, produce section with the greens and all that. Pick your proteins from your list, and fats and carbs pick from your list also, depending on your metabolic type and how good you feel on them. And enjoy yourself this week, and enjoy the wider variety this week will offer, especially after we were encouraging a liquid diet on week 2. So enjoy some chewing this week. Slide 10 offers some more of the probiotic options, especially the lacto-fermented pickles are a great idea. I have one idea here. There's just that's a basic recipe. If you have my recipe favorites, there's some other ideas in there. And then I like to add apple cider vinegar once the lacto-fermented vegetables are done. And the recipe there for pickles, like I said, it's just typically that's a quart of water, not any more or less, especially with the teaspoon of salt. But you can cover in water with a teaspoon of salt. Most people aren't going to make just a cup of pickles anyway, so it's typically a quart of water. And then the morning drink change, again, is just added in there for emphasis that you can change, but it's not necessary. So be soft on yourself there. Slide 11 is we're going to go into some extras now. And for those of you who are just watching this on the web, there's it's not controversial in my world, but the powers that be have pursued Jim Humble, the founder and maker of the Miracle Mineral Supplement, or chlorine dioxide. And I believe that sodium hypochlorite or calcium hypochlorite is the starter material, and it's mixed with citric acid. You end up with this compound called chlorine dioxide. Then you have, some sodium byproducts and some calcium byproducts left, and that's basically just some extra minerals that are in the solution there. But you can get citric acid powdered in any store, any old health food store, or the GNC even, and you can get sodium hypochlorite at one of the links below, the miraclemineral.org, I believe, or jimhumble.org will give you links, and you can find out more about how to buy that stuff on the web. They just can't make claims, and don't be advertising this around there too much, but it's on the radar with the big powers, but there's nothing they can do about it. People are going to buy and sell this stuff. It's not going to stop just because they don't want it to happen. Jim Humboldt actually cured malaria, I think, 35 years ago with this product. And so, that's why, it's good for purifying water. Like I said, it's a disinfectant, so you can use it to purify your water supply and kill pathogens in your body and on your body. I haven't had much success with toe fungus with it, but it just kind of burns, but always worthy of a shot. So don't underestimate MMS. It's something to think about when your cleanse is over. It's not necessarily a good week to start on it this week. It would have been a good week 2 item, but I didn't want to bring it in because it's just too many things for people to take. But if you were taking it on week 2, based on watching this in the future, we did this in July of 2013. If you're one of the people doing this on a web-based practice, then then you might actually understand why I gave this out to you in week 2 if you didn't understand now. It's because this stuff is killing the bad tenants in the apartment complex. Slide 12, we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about shape-shifting microbes. And what I love is when I start to see schools of thought that tie together various traditions. And I don't know this Gunther Enderlein. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I found this just on a Google search about biopleomorphism, and I was so pleased to run into this website that the link is on the second to last or the last page of this PowerPoint. And I don't know what sane of medicine is in. This is a bit of a ramble here, but it is cutting edge, and they're doing this over in Europe. And I believe that what we're just trying to get through here, when I see Paracelsus Clinic, I immediately think, wow, there was one of the first alchemists and one of the greatest healers of the Middle Ages, and excellent man. So you start to think like, oh, there's a clinic named after him, in Switzerland. And so you're going to see here, they're claiming no antibiotics, every kind of chronic disease. They don't need hypertensive drugs. They don't need any lipid-lowering drugs. And you start to look at this and you go, wow, this is quite amazing, because they're treating the gut. And this is what's been going on in some schools of thought in Chinese medicine for thousands of years. Treat the gut first, and the rest of the body cures itself around that. So you can see they also refer to infections, fibromyalgia, chronic inflammations. So what they're practicing here is worthy of future research for me, this Sanum medicine. But we have our own variations here in the States, and it's basically treat the gut, get the microbes cleaned up in there, and recognize a few things that we're going to be talking about now. Slide 13. So don't worry about the wording so much. You get stuck on isopathic remedies or pleomorphism or any of that. The thing that I want you to get out of this is that some of these remedies, they penetrate deep into the fluids in the cells. What we're doing here, and essential oils do that, and dry skin brushing does this, and MMS could penetrate deep into the cells, the body too. So the theory of pleomorphism is that we are all part of nature, and we're also in a constant state of flux, and we're also bound to symbiosis, or a mutual sort of evolution, with what he states as the primal parasite or primal symbiote. And this is all a bit new to me, but what we name things isn't really necessarily that important, other than just understanding that we have a coevolution with microorganisms. And it's really interesting that Aspergillus is a type of fungus, and it's actually a major part of miso, not particularly that species, but that genus designation. Aspergillus is part of what's in miso, just like we have healthy forms of E. coli in our body and unhealthy forms. There are healthy forms of Aspergillus and unhealthy forms. So, are we evolving in an upward or a downward direction is the key point here. And there's just some things about valence here, or we could call that chi or charge. So, the low end or the lower evolved states of this endobiote or microorganism symbiote human is they do fulfill some vital functions, and they're sort of like our foundational needs can be met. And we're talking about clotting, we're talking about the protein content of fibrin, and we're talking about thrombocytes, and we're talking about the ability to regulate the viscosity of the blood, and then we're talking about protein acid buffers, and and it's fascinating information here. So move on to the next slide, slide 14, and then we move on to, from what they are sort of helping us do, in addition to making energy for the body, here's some of the things that these critters do. that we didn't talk about in class today, but if you're watching the PowerPoint, then good for you. Um, what can a helpful intestinal flora do for me? Well, they can give you increased immunity. They can help with hormonal breakdown. They can help with transformed bile. Remember, bile is where your fat soluble toxins are spit out in. They can give you more energy. We've measurable B vitamin production. Like you can take in milk, and then you can also give milk to microorganisms like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. And then the B vitamin content of the same milk, once you feed it to them, shows markedly higher after a number of days or weeks of them breaking it down. So yogurt has more B vitamins than the milk it came from. That's very well known now, cannot be disputed. Um, helpful intestinal flora will help your immunity by being able to help your body recognize what is self and what is not self. Helpful intestinal flora will give you a clearer mind. How do I know that? Because I've been doing this for 20 years and I see it. It can help deactivate toxins from yeast and fungus. And so, we're looking at, we have helpful yeast and unhelpful yeast, and we have helpful bacteria. So unhelpful yeast produce mycotoxins. They themselves are complete protein. So in a sense, they could sacrifice themselves for our protein digestion. They're going to crowd out other, if your apartment complexes are full of helpful critters, we're not going to have a problem with unhelpful ones. And they help clean out oxidize and other harmful compounds like heavy metals. They sacrifice themselves to clear out heavy metals out of our body. The helpful ones do. The unhelpful ones surround themselves with heavy metal. Like Candida, they say now, surrounds itself with mercury to protect itself from the white blood cells. So quite fascinating stuff. Then we're looking at the milieu, as he calls it, and that's the sort of the critters that live down there and the terrain that they live in. So the apartment complexes and the tenants in there. So on slide 14 here, don't get too caught up with the terminology again. And you're looking at an evolutionary process here. So again, we're talking about how much acid and alkaline food we're taking in, and are we getting enough minerals and protein? And when we say redox potential, I would translate that as, are you getting enough high powered, fresh, vital food? So just interesting that we start to look at these bacterial, high powered, high evolved bacteria of the endobiote. Remember, the symbiote that lives within us and on us. There's a cycle here of evolution, and so each part of bacteria that live within us, if I can somehow formulate this, which I'm still trying to formulate it in my own mind, is they can shapeshift. And so we want them to be treated properly with respect in our own mind and as a partner, and that we're just trying to help them also evolve with us and not kill them and kick them out. So when we talk about herbal or natural antibiotic treatment, we're not looking at killing everything. We're looking, when they say a lower valence, in this context, I'm going to term it to, it's going to be less reactive and therefore less pathogenic forms. So this isopathic or natural treatment does not result in a toxic bacterial waste as with antibiotics. And so we have to look at the terminology here a bit more, but I love what's underlined here, which is my own creation. Bacteria are not fixed entities, but they're constantly mutating, and that's a big takeaway here, that microorganisms in our body are not fixed, but they can mutate, and they can based on the internal terrain of what we provide for them. So you can read the rest of that, and if you have any questions, we can discuss this either in a group setting or we can discuss it in private. But this is like, these are not woo-woo people studying this stuff. These are people that are definitely scientists. So, and there's some interesting food for thought here that, so the human being's milieu, our diet, our acid alkaline status. So the bacteria even develop from our own protein structure of our body, and bacteria move from one evolutionary stage to another, and they're changing, and we must not regard bacteria and fungi as alien. They're parts of us, and that we need to start thinking better thoughts towards them. And then we see the flora again, as they state. We are mostly microorganisms, and this has been proved over and over again that we're mostly microorganisms, and we need to start viewing that our energy systems, our nervous system, are all part of this complex and mysterious force that lives within us and on us. Um, and that there's some interesting, these protites or bions, as Wilhelm Reich put them, are part of every human cell and in fluids, and that they may have some of their own structure, maybe similar to our own hemoglobin. So you got scratch your head like this is really interesting stuff, and I'll be reading more about this in the coming week and present more in week 5. But this was just sort of my bit of getting this food for thought for you, in that it's the story goes on slide 17 here, and there's the link to the actual website itself and the article. So more coming here, and I'm not saying I have all the answers nor even a very good explanation today, but it's enough to give you food for thought. That the takeaway here, the one big takeaway, is that microorganisms, throwing it out there, that they can and do shapeshift. There's evidence that they can and do even look like our own cells. I mean, look at HIV. It hides inside of the immune zone cells to protect itself as a virus. It's quite fascinating. So we'll be finishing this up a bit more next week. And I hope you all have a great week. Remember, week 3 is about reestablishing the new tenets. So focus on the probiotic foods. Focus on keeping some healthful thoughts about them and encouraging the healthful tenets. And get outside and get some fresh air and move around. We had some discussion today in group about getting some movement, and it's really important to keep the lymph moving. So have a great week, and we'll look forward to some celebration at the end of this coming week. And don't forget to celebrate day by day and smell the roses and smell some essential oils and give yourself a massage or get some touch and affection from others. Signing out.